What is up, YouTube? This is the Working Investor. In this video, we're going to talk about these two new funds, FEAT and FIVY. This is going to be a little bit of a different style video. This is going to be a video talking about, as a consumer myself, how I'm going to play these funds and how I look at them, the good, the bad, the ugly, the payments, how much I'm going to give you some early guesstimates, how much we're probably going to get paid, and what are the strengths and weaknesses of these funds. So we're going to analyze this, not just reading the prospectus, but we're actually going to analyze this beyond the prospectus as how to play these funds and what to consider from my perspective. Nothing here is financial advice or any kind of advice, not legal advice, not tax advice. This is a humble consumer retail investor sharing you my understanding, and if I'm wrong and there's any inaccuracies, let me know. So let's talk about these funds. The Dorsey Wright funds, the FEAT and FIVY, got the email from Robinhood. FYI, the first distribution, I kind of guessed it, it's going to be next. So they're going to be on Group A of the ABCD funds. This week is Group D, next week is Group A, but because they just came out, we're going to go through a full cycle of Group A, B, C, and D. My assumption will be whatever they collect in the group of A, B, C, and D, whatever is corresponding to these funds, that will give you the best understanding of what your average percent will be in your payout. I can't tell you the amount, I can tell you the average percent. We could try to guess the amount by looking at the price, but the price could vary. So let's get into the video. So I mentioned in the previous video what the Dorsey Wright is and certain criterias they have. YieldMax has, I think it's like a draft of a prospectus that they have about the Dorsey Wright. So you can go ahead and read that. It's a certain, there's a certain criteria of choosing it. So let's talk about FEAT and FIVY. And like I said, so first of all, I'm going to talk about the stacking effect. We're going to talk about the expense ratios, some shortcomings with sample size. So let's go into it. So let's talk about the stacking effect. Number one, when considering these funds, FEAT and FIVY, right? So they could their underlyings could change, right? So FEAT is 100% of the 5 underlyings of YieldMax, which is Tesla, NVIDIA, FIVY, Nefli, and Misty. I organized them by the month of payments, and they actually according to the prospectus, draft of the prospectus that I read, and of course it's subject to change. So I can't tell you 100% if it's going to be accurate. There's a disclaimer in there, so just keep looking out for the finalized version of the prospectus. But what I understand, my understanding is that they could rebalance monthly and reconstitute monthly. And I think I've read some kind of verbiage that about 3 business days before the last day of the month, they decide to make the rebalance or the reconstitution. They mentioned some phrase that if a fund like no longer trades on the S&P 500, whatever, if it's no longer tradable on the NASDAQ or whatever, it's no longer, a fund has been pretty much taken off the public space, then they will remove the fund, whatever it moves, but they will not be able to replace it until the end of the month. I saw some kind of verbiage. Again, only a preliminary. I don't know. I can't tell you anything of the accuracy. Look out for the accuracy. So let's, very, very important, look at your stacking effect. So let's say if you own, so let's talk about FEAT. So FEAT holds all these 5 funds in equal balance: Tesla, NVIDIA, FIVY, Nefli, Misty, and they will only hold the the YieldMax cover call, single stock cover call versions of these. And because you divide it by 5, so it's 20% in each of the holding. 20% Tesla, 20% NVIDIA, 20% FIVY, Nefli, and Misty, respectively. Again, always look at don't just look at the basket. Look at what contains in the basket. The basket is only good as the sum of its parts. And then when it comes to the FIVY is very interesting, and I like FIVY a lot for a lot of reasons, because FIVY doesn't just hold the YieldMax, it also holds the actual raw stock. So it'll hold, and it does a 60-40 split. 60% would be the YieldMax single stock cover call ETF, and 40% will be the raw stock. And there's some really cool benefits about having this kind of sweet spot of having both. And there is a gimme and gotcha. There's also some concern that I found, and I want to share with you. And I don't know if it's a real concern, not a real concern. This is something that I am concerned about. So it would have, because it's 20% of Tesla, right? And 60% of the 20% is Tesla. So the math comes out that from the entire fund, 12% will be the income portion, 8% will be its equivalent equity portion. 12%, 8%, 12%, 8%, 12%, 8%, and so on and so forth, right? So 40% of your fund is holding equity. Now, why is there a sweet spot, right? So there's something called the cover call. There's something that there's strengths and weaknesses to every single strategy. Every type of option strategy, there's a gimme and gotcha. There's pros and cons, right? So the cover call strategy theoretically, it doesn't always mean it's going to be so, right? In a flat market or a bear market or even a slightly bullish market, it will have an advantage, relative advantage over its underlier. So let's say if Tesla stays exactly like within, like pretty much doesn't move for like 6 months, it stays within $1 for the whole 6 months, your cover call strategy on Tesla theoretically should outperform the underlier, because Tesla, if you had 100 grand in Tesla and it didn't move, barely moved anything at all, at the end of 6 months, you still have about, plus or minus 100 grand, right? But if you had a cover call strategy on Tesla and you were selling premium month over month, or week over week, over every single week of those 6 months, you should have a better performance. When you look at your portfolio, you're going to have the 100,000 of Tesla, plus you're going to have all that premium you collected all those weeks of the 26 weeks is about 6 months. So 26 weeks of premium collected in there. So you should perform better than the underlier in a flat market or a bear market, because if Tesla falls down, instead of just having your equity fall, if Tesla drops 20%, you also would drop 20% minus the premium, the income you're collecting. You're collecting income all along the way. But also slightly bullish market, if Tesla gradually goes up, theoretically, if a good fund manager does a good job, writing the calls, it should be, let's say they do the calls 0.5% out of the money every week, or 1% out of the money. So they can capture a little bit of the upside, 0.5%, 1%, 0.25%, whatever it is, they can capture some of that upside. So if it goes really gradually up, like a very, very small angle ramp going up, you should be able to have an advantage over the underlying. Should, doesn't always mean so. Please take your own risk. But then what is the big disadvantage with a cover call strategy? And I mentioned this in one of my videos. It's a weakness. There's probably many weaknesses, but this is one of the weaknesses that I'm worried about a lot of times. Let me show you. So if you go on Google Images and you type in Whipsaw, right? This is one of the pictures I saw that popped up on Google Images. So Whipsaw is when you have a really rapid downward momentum and a really rapid upside reversal, almost like a V-shaped recovery. You see, it looks like the shape of the letter V, right? So with a cover call ETF, you enjoy all of the downside. Let me show you an example of this so you could see a visualization of what I'm trying to explain to you. So here's the perfect example with Tesla and Tesla, right? So the blue is Tesla and the yellow is Tesla. And don't worry, I'm going to show you the total return as well. But we're looking right now at just price momentum. You could see here, this is year over year. So year over year, Tesla is up 90.3, well, about 90%, right? Would you say? And Tesla is down, let's say about 25%, approximately 25% year over year, right? Just from the price, not total return. And just FYI, if you want to see total return, I plugged in total return on Seeking Alpha. Tesla does not have a dividend. So they say, I don't know, they have a different number. They have 83%. So whatever, 90, 83, 90% roughly year over year up. And then let's look at Tesla. So according to Seeking Alpha, Tesla year over year, you can see here price return, let's say about 25% down. We said 24, 25% down in price, but total return up 47. So let's say if Tesla was up, total return about 80 to 90%, and income fund, even though the price went down, was able to capture total return 47%. But you see there's a gap. You're missing some of that upside because when I had that whipsaw effect, like we mentioned. So how cool would it be with the FIVY fund where you get to actually enjoy some of that upside? Because if you only have the synthetic cover call ETF, and granted, YieldMax does something very cool that no other funds do, and I wish other funds would do this. They have the call credit spread opportunistic play where they can try to capture a little bit more juice to get a little bit more of the upside to fill in that gap that you're missing out with that whipsaw effect. But because FIVE is 40%, 40% of it is the actual raw equity. You get 40% of your of force lifting your portfolio back up on the rebound. That's what I want to think theoretically, right? Just a fun fact, we'll go back to that point in a second. So I looked at the expense ratio. So everything you have to think about ratios, right? So FEAT is the 0.99%. That's the percent that they inherit from the single stock ETFs of YieldMax. And then because they have it nicely in a package and they're balancing it for you, they're charging you the 0.29%, the extra additional management fee. So if you add them up together, my math is correct, it's 1.28%. So why is FIVE cheaper? Why is FIVE 0.88% cheaper? Because they're charging you the 99.99% management fee, but the management fee does not entail all the equity because 40% of the equity is the actual raw stock. So it's 60% of 0.99% because 60% of it is the YieldMax single stock cover call ETFs. And that comes out to be about 0.954, or they round it down to 0.59. So that's where you have 0.59 plus the 0.29% management fee. Hence the total fee, the gross, what I saw, I found this on the YieldMax's website, is 0.88. So it's a little cheaper. Hey, right. So here's the thing. With Dorsey Wright, remember, they reconstitute. They have the ability to reconstitute and rebalance every month. If I'm not mistaken, if I'm mistaken, let me know. What I recall, and basically what happens, right? If you have, you have Tesla and you experience the roller coaster together all the way down, and you want to get that upside. That's why you have the actual raw stock. But what happens if they reconstitute before it has a chance to go up? Because it doesn't necessarily have to have Tesla. It's not married to these funds. It has to they have this grading system, and every month they may keep it. Once in a while, all of them could potentially change. None of them could potentially change. Some of them could potentially change. They may swap it out, and you may have appreciated the downside and then it got swapped out before you got to appreciate the upside. That's where I find is a potential shortcoming with these funds. But then a strength for it is that, let's say, theoretically, they should always try to find the best momentum, whatever matches the Dorsey Wright momentum. You always kind of stay relevant in a way. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, right? So let's talk about sample size. So they're limited within the family of the YieldMax single stock cover call ETFs. So you don't have the whole entire pool of the NASDAQ of the 100, 101, 102, whatever ETFs out there, stocks out there. You're using the limited, whatever, 30 plus, 30, 32, whatever, plus or minus a few, whatever goes. And of course, it keeps growing every so often that we don't anticipate, but you're limited within that sample size. So, you may not have, maybe something else would meet the criteria, but they don't have it as a single stock. The payment schedule we just saw, it's on Group A, according to, if you look at the YieldMax schedule, you'll see. So you just have to go to distribution schedules and then it'll pop up. You go to the bottom, and I'm sorry about all this scrolling. It's probably making you dizzy. But you go to the bottom, you see here Group A right here on the left, and you go all the way to the bottom, you see FEAT and FIVE is in Group A. So the good news is, I like about it is that at least there should be about, theoretically, more or less 13 payments in the year, because if it's on a 28-day cycle, there should be roughly every 28 days, which is about 13, more or less 13, 12 to 13 payments versus just 12 payments a year. So that's pretty cool. And then let's go into guessing. So now I know you guys all want to know the guess. So here's my disclaimer. I didn't take all the time and go through every single, I should really go through every single distribution that they gave in the YieldMax funds and then look at the percentage and get the average. We have in the Kamir's Discord a guy that does, so I use his data. But, I don't like to look at just the last payment because, I like to look at least 3 payments and get an average, or at least whatever the bigger sample size you can get to get an average payment, because things fluctuate, implied volatility fluctuates. I just want to make an educated guess. Please, this is just an educated guess. But I looked at the average of Tesla, FIVY Nephi, Misty, and they could be missing 1 or 2 weeks of data, and the person tracking it may have, I'm not sure if it may or may have not tracked it from the beginning of all time since the OMAC, so it may just be a few months. So it's just some good data, but it may be missing something. Just take it with a grain of salt. So let's say hypothetically the average yield should be, and if I'm wrong with my numbers and you have a more accurate number, let me know. I like to have a more accurate number. But let's say for argument's sake, it's about 71.8% is the average yield. It doesn't mean you're going to have that average yield in FIVY, because FIVY kind of, has 40% equity, 60% cover calls, and, cover single stock ETFs. Maybe for FEAT, you can extrapolate it will have about that 71 points, 0.718. So we have about, but minus the additional 0.29 expense ratio on top of it. You have to take that off as well. But then for FIVY, you have to do the 60% of 71.8% is approximately 43%. That should be a rough estimate. But what will be even better and more accurate, in my opinion? What do you guys think? We're going to go, right now it's Group D. So we're going to have afterwards Group A, B, C, and D, and then Group A. That's going to be, so we're going to go through a full cycle soon. I think that if you look at the average, don't look at the amount, look at the average yield of, in Group A, Tesla, in Group B, FIVY, and FEAT, in Group C, Nephi, and in Group D, Misty. Look at the average percent payment in each group, right? And then, because it's equally weighted, it should be equally weighted and balanced monthly, right? You should just, get an average of that and then just do 60% of that, 60%. It's a 0.6 times that number. That should give you, I think that should give you a closest possible yield. Let's just do a quick rough. So for argument's sake, for FEAT, let's say right now the stocks is trading, let's say around $50 a share, right? But that this price could change by then, right? Let's say $50 a share. So if you take $50 a share times 0.718, this will be for FEAT. That would be $35.90 per year. Now I'm dividing it by 13 because of 13 payments. That's why I'm dividing it by 13. And that would be about, $2.76, possibly. Again, please take this with a grain of salt. Things could vary wildly. Implied volatility can go so low. So please just take it with a grain of salt. And then let's say if, I could, you could just do, we said 43%. So let's say 71. So $50 times 0.718, right? But then multiply that by 0.6 for 60%. So it'll be 21. This is for FIVY. If you want to calculate FIVY, that's $21.54 divided by 13 months. So it's about $1.65, right? It's about $1.65. This is just a guesstimate. This is just a good exercise, and it'll probably be a more accurate estimate, a more educated guess. It'll be more and more educated as we have more data. But that's how I'm looking at these funds. Now, here are some good questions. What if you own the single stock ETF, right? Let's say you own let's say you own, Tesla, right? But then you own, FEAT. Think about it, that 20% of FEAT is just more Tesla. So you're literally doubling up on exposure. If you like that kind of extra exposure, it shouldn't be a problem. But if you don't want to double up on exposure, it could be an issue, right? And also, don't forget, the option strategies that they do in these funds, from my understanding, is they're just kind of piggybacking off these single stock ETFs, right? It's the same single stock ETFs that are built into these funds. So it's the exact same strike prices, the exact same managers, the exact same strategies. So by having Tesla as an individual holding, or let's say if you have 10K in Tesla and you have 10K in FEAT, remember 20% of 10K is $2,000. It's almost like you have to $12,000 exposure to Tesla. That's how I think about it, right? And then if you look at the Magnificent Seven, right? And it should be roughly equally balanced, weighted, but it may not be perfect. We take 100% divided by 7 for Magnificent 7. So 14% of Mag 7, let's say, is Tesla. 14% is NVIDIA. 14% is FIVY. So you're 40. So if you have 100 grand in Mag 7, remember 14 grand of that is almost like having direct exposure to Tesla. And then if you have 100 grand of FEAT, remember that 20% of it is Tesla. So it's almost like having 20 grand. If you have 100 grand of FEAT, 100 grand of Mag 7, it's like you have 20 grand of the FEAT is Tesla, and then 14 grand of the 14 grand of the Mag 7 is Tesla, and 20 grand of the FEAT is Tesla. So think about these double risk. If you have YMAX, it's about, last I checked the prospectus, it's about 3.5% per underlying, roughly. So again, think about it. If you have 100 grand in YMAX, about $3,000 or $3,500, let's say, is in Tesla. And then if you have, let's say you own Tesla outright, so that's another 10 grand to have 10 grand direct exposure of Tesla. And if you have 100 grand of FEAT, hypothetically, 20% of that, which is 20 grand, is Tesla. So you're having duplicate, redundant exposure. Just bear in mind, this is my understanding. If I'm wrong, let me know. But it's okay if you're cool with that. But if you're not cool with that, you have to think about how you want to structure your portfolio. The thing with Ulti is Ulti can have the same underlying, but because they're running, it's not piggybacking off the single stock ETF. It's not taking the pieces and building the building blocks of the single stock ETFs and building up. They could be longing Tesla. They could be shorting Tesla. They could be neutral with Tesla. They could do a collar method, iron colander. I don't know what they could. They could do all kinds of stuff with it. Even if they do the cover call or a synthetic cover call on Tesla, they may choose different strike prices, different expirations, different implied volatility times. So just by varying that could change things. Or let's say if you own TSLP, or if you own some same underlying, just in a different manager, a different team is doing it. Different people have different thought processes, have different ways of doing their mechanics of the trade. So, you could argue there is a little bit of variation, a little bit of a diversification. Of course, same underlying, same global risk, but there's some different ways of playing it. You know what I mean? So these are things that I like to consider when owning these funds. Strengths, weaknesses, does it work for you? Does it not work for you? If I'm incorrect in any of these assumptions, please let me know. This is the best of my knowledge. This is the Working Investor over and out. Again, nothing is financial advice. Just want to bring some thought process out there, brainstorm with you guys. Let me know what your thoughts are. Hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your trading week.